Another workday began at the sewing factory, and the factory director, Irma, was busy trying to get everything in order. She had 2 meetings scheduled with suppliers, followed by reviewing new sketches and inspecting designs. There was so much to do. Unfortunately, her car broke down that morning, so she had to take it to the repair shop. In the evening, instead of calling a taxi, she decided to walk home. Light snow was falling, crunching beneath her feet. As Irma crossed a bridge, she noticed some children playing nearby, their laughter echoing in the cold air. It brought back memories of her own childhood, good times indeed. One little boy got on a sled, and with a push from the others, he zoomed down the hill. The sled picked up speed and went far beyond the riverbank, stopping nearly in the middle of the frozen river. The boy fell off and stood on the ice, which had been weakened by the current, and before anyone could react, he fell through, screaming for help. The other children were terrified but too afraid to go near. Without thinking, Irma rushed to the river. The boy had disappeared beneath the ice. She didn't know how, but miraculously she managed to pull him out. She had to break the ice and dive into the freezing water. Fortunately, the river wasn't deep. A passerby called an ambulance, and the boy was taken to the hospital. Irma declined to be hospitalized and returned home instead. When Irma arrived at her doorstep, soaked to the bone, her husband was shocked. He helped her change and, learning what had happened, scolded her. "Why do you always have to get involved? Why didn't you go to the hospital? Let me run you a hot bath. You're always sticking your nose into other people's problems. You don't even know that child. What if you had drowned yourself in that freezing water?" Irma, wrapped in a blanket, whispered, "How can you say that? It's a child, someone's son. What if he had drowned? Was I supposed to just walk by? Don't worry, the most important thing is that everyone is safe." However, things weren't so simple. That night, Irma developed a high fever and Noelle had to call an ambulance. She was diagnosed with pneumonia and admitted to the hospital, where she lay in a room receiving treatment. She endured painful injections and medication alongside 3 other women. Irma became friends with one of them, a young patient named Natalie, who was being treated for acute bronchitis. Despite her friendly demeanor, Natalie seemed deeply sad. During that week, Noelle didn't visit Irma, citing work commitments, though he frequently called her via video chat. One day, during one of these calls, Irma stepped into the corridor to avoid disturbing her roommates. But this time she didn't make it in time. Natalie overheard the conversation and looked stunned. When the call ended, Irma noticed Natalie's shocked expression. "Is everything all right?" she asked. "You're looking at me strangely." Natalie, looking pale, apologized in a melancholy tone. "I'm so sorry, Irma. I didn't mean to. I had no idea Noelle was your husband." Irma was completely taken aback. Confused, she stared at Natalie, waiting for her to continue. After a brief pause, Natalie nervously began, "You see, I had a relationship with Noelle. I loved him. And I thought we would get married. I didn't know he was married, I swear. He told me he'd been divorced for a long time and that his wife was crazy. He wooed me with flowers and took me out. I waited eagerly for every meeting. Then I got pregnant." Natalie's voice broke as she continued, "I know it was my fault, but when I told him, Noelle changed completely. He yelled at me and demanded I get an abortion. I was in shock. I loved him so much, I never expected that. When I refused, he lost it and broke things off. Everything fell apart in a matter of days. I lost my job due to downsizing, and then I got seriously ill. I thought it was just a cold, but I had to be hospitalized. Thanks to the doctors, I'm recovering now, but I don't know how to move forward. I have almost no money left, and I don't know where to find work. I feel terrible for what I've done to you. Please forgive me." Tears streamed down Natalie's face as she covered it with her hands. Irma sat quietly, trying to make sense of her emotions. Oddly, she didn't feel hatred toward Natalie. She should have despised her, knowing she had been her husband's mistress. But as she looked at the young, naive girl, she couldn't help but feel pity. Irma sighed and softly said, "Why should I hate you? If Noelle truly loved me, he would never have cheated. I'm even grateful to you in a way. Noelle never wanted children, so he's unlikely to accept yours. Don't worry. I'll help you," Irma said kindly. "I'll bring you into my company. I need an accountant. You did the right thing by keeping your child. It's such a motivation to keep going and push through hardships. I always dreamed of becoming a mother, but but it wasn't meant to be. I'll have a talk with Noel when I get home. He's been getting too bold lately, and he doesn't even work. Natalie looked at Irma in astonishment and replied, "Thank you so much, Irma. I'm truly grateful to you. You won't regret hiring me." Irma called her HR colleague and instructed them to hire Natalie. Then she quietly said, "Excuse me, I need some time alone to think." Understandingly, Natalie nodded and left the room quietly, as the other patients were undergoing procedures. Irma closed her eyes and began to reminisce about her family life with Noel, her childhood, and how her once loving husband had turned into such a different person. She grew up in a large family where her father worked as a loader at a factory, always tired and grim. Her mother took on odd jobs, trying to make ends meet while raising 3 children. As the eldest, Irma had to shoulder most of the household responsibilities, caring for her younger siblings, Lily and Devon. Their life was marked by extreme poverty. Irma often wore clothes handed down from neighbors, which were usually too big and awkward, making her a target for bullying at school. Her childhood memories were far from happy ones. Her parents seemed to forget that she was just a child longing for fun and play like everyone else, but she had to take her brother and sister on walks and care for them, which strangely became some of her fondest memories, building snowmen, sliding down hills and rolling in the snow together. As Irma grew older, her desire to escape poverty and get an education only strengthened. She excelled in her studies and her teachers praised her dedication. However, at home, there was no quiet place to study. She often stayed late at the school library to escape the chaos. But this angered her mother, who would scold her, saying, "Where have you been? Who's going to take care of Devon? I can't do everything alone." Irma, deeply hurt, thought to herself, "Why did you have 3 children then? I'm not your servant. I want to go to university." But when she expressed this, her mother became furious and shouted, "University? Who put that idea in your head? Your teacher. You'll study sewing, and that's enough. What does a woman need higher education for? You're selfish, only thinking about yourself. What about your brother and sister? Aren't you going to help us?" Despite the hurtful words, Irma followed her own path. After graduating, she secretly left home for another city to attend university. Her beloved teacher, Martha, helped her secure a dorm room, and Irma passed her exams with flying colors, becoming a student at an economics university. Only after settling in did she call her mother, hoping for some praise or encouragement. But instead, her mother scolded her once again, saying, "How could you leave like that? You lied to us, saying you were visiting a friend. Come back home. Lily and Devon miss you. You're like a mother to them. Your father is furious. You won't make it there, you'll just waste your time." Irma cried bitterly, feeling abandoned. "Thanks for the support, Mom. I love my brother and sister, but they're your children, not mine. You never believed in me." Determined, she threw herself into her studies, sharing a dorm room with a kind girl named Sydney, who often shared food with her. After a year, Irma started working part-time at a small sewing factory, earning just enough for food and necessities. She didn't forget about her siblings and often invited them to visit during vacations. Upon graduating, Irma continued working at the factory. Management noticed her dedication and intelligence, and she quickly rose through the ranks from chief accountant to deputy director, and eventually to factory director within 5 years. She fulfilled her dream of buying her own apartment, a symbol of her hard-earned success. For Irma, being able to afford quality clothes, food, and take care of herself was the reward she had worked so hard for. Even her mother, who had once doubted her, was now proud of her daughter's achievements. Irma didn't forget her family, sending money to her parents every month and helping her sister Lily get settled in life. Irma met her future husband by chance. She had been so focused on her career that she hadn't given much thought to her personal life. One day, while hurrying to work, her heel broke and she sprained her ankle, falling awkwardly onto the sidewalk. As she cried out in pain, strong hands gently lifted her up. A man fussed around her, asking, "Are you okay? A beautiful lady like you shouldn't be walking. Let me give you a ride. My name is Noel, and I work downtown." Irma smiled at the coincidence, thinking to herself how unexpectedly life could change. "I work there too. Could you give me a ride to the sewing factory then?" "Thank you, Noel. You're a true gentleman. I really appreciate it," Irma said. On the way, they struck up a conversation, and Irma was pleasantly surprised by how much she liked this charming young man. They even agreed to grab coffee after work. Imagine Irma's surprise when, right on time, she saw Noel arrive with a bouquet of delicate flowers and a large package. From it, he pulled out a shoebox and handed it to her. "These shoes are for you?" "I hope I got the size right," he said with a smile. The shoes were beautiful and fit her perfectly. Such a thoughtful gesture completely won Irma over, and she looked at Noel with deep affection and gratitude. Thus their relationship blossomed. Irma fell in love almost immediately, and Noel didn't hide his feelings either. He was serious about her and often spoke about wanting to start a family. Irma's parents were thrilled with her choice of husband. They saw him as intelligent, well-read, and polite. Irma's mother would often whisper to her, "Darling, you're so lucky. Noel is a great guy, not like your father. You should have a baby soon, and then your family will be complete." Noel soon proudly introduced Irma to his mother, Tarn. "Mom, this is Irma, my fiancée, and she's also the director of a sewing factory. I love her, and we're getting married soon." Tarn smiled widely at Irma, but Irma could immediately tell that Tarn's smile wasn't sincere. It was clear to Irma that Tarn was envious of her success, especially after learning that Irma had achieved everything on her own, growing up in a large family. Tarn herself had been through several marriages, and her difficult personality made it hard for anyone to get along with her. But Irma was used to ignoring the opinions of strangers, so she didn't let her mother-in-law's behavior bother her. She thought, "Let her be jealous. I don't care. The main thing is that Noel loves me, and that's all that matters." At first, the young couple hardly ever argued. Noel was tender and caring. He would come home from work earlier than Irma, prepare dinner, and greet her warmly. He understood how responsible she was and tried to help in whatever way he could. Irma dreamed of having children, but as the years passed, she couldn't get pregnant. When she finally did, the joy was short-lived as she suffered a miscarriage. The doctors couldn't determine the cause, and Irma was devastated. She sought comfort from Noel, but instead of offering sympathy, he scolded her for being too emotional. Irma began to realize that Noel didn't seem eager to have children. When she suggested trying artificial insemination a year later, he got angry. "Darling, I think you've lost your mind with this idea. What if it doesn't work? What if we end up with triplets?" "I'm not ready for that. We still have our whole lives ahead of us, and you're always making things more complicated." But Irma, always stubborn, didn't give up on her dream. She convinced Noel to undergo the procedure, and once again she became pregnant. Tragically, another miscarriage followed just a month later, despite the doctor's best efforts. Irma barely survived this second loss, both physically and emotionally. It took her a long time to recover, and she even sought the help of a psychologist. She felt broken, unable to understand why this was happening to her. She didn't want to get out of bed, go to work, or do anything. Life seemed pointless without children. Noel, meanwhile, became increasingly distant. He pretended that none of it concerned him, and soon he quit his job, claiming he had found a high-paying job he could do from home. But Irma never saw any income, and he often disappeared during the day. Little did she know at the time that Noel had a lover. It was unthinkable to her. Now, lying in her hospital bed, Irma made a decision. As soon as she was discharged, she would file for divorce. She left the hospital a day earlier than planned, without telling Noel. She wanted to see what he was up to in her absence. Quietly opening the front door to their home, she immediately noticed an unfamiliar pair of women's boots in the hallway and heard loud voices coming from the kitchen. She sat down in the corridor, listening. Her mother-in-law, Tarn, was scolding Noel like a child. "When are you going to get rid of your wife and become rich? If she were out of the picture, you'd inherit all her property, her business, this apartment, the car. I can't stand her, and I'm just waiting for her to disappear." Noel snapped back at his mother, "I'm doing what I can. Soon, everything will be just like that. Her factory will be mine, and I'll sell this apartment. I have my own plans, so don't interfere with me," Noel snapped. Irma wasn't scared at all. In fact, she found Noel's confidence almost amusing. Did he really think he could pull this off? Irma purposely coughed loudly and started tapping her shoes, pretending she had just walked in. Noel immediately rushed out of the kitchen with his mother, both of them plastering on fake smiles. "Irma, my love, you're already home? Why didn't you call? I would have come for you. I missed you so much. It's so lonely and sad without you," he said, feigning concern. Irma's mother-in-law chimed in as she prepared to leave. "I'm glad to see you've recovered. Take care of yourself and stay well." All the best." Irma watched this performance with disgust. Her mood was completely ruined, and she simply said, "I'll go to my room and rest." Once there, she cried into her pillow for a long time, unable to believe that Noelle could be so two-faced and hypocritical. The horror of realizing her marriage was over hit her hard. She barely fell asleep after midnight, determined to change everything the next day. However, in the middle of the night, Irma suddenly felt someone pounce on her. She didn't have time to react before she felt a needle prick her arm and saw Noelle's blurry profile. Everything that followed felt like a nightmare. Noelle and another man were speaking to her, and she nodded and signed papers, though she couldn't understand what she was signing. Then Noelle poured alcohol into her mouth, and she obediently swallowed without tasting it. Her husband began smashing everything around them: furniture, a Chinese vase, picture frames, and a glass coffee table. People in white coats arrived, strapped Irma into a straitjacket, and took her to the hospital. When Irma finally regained some clarity, her head throbbed, and she was incredibly thirsty. She looked around, disoriented. The room resembled a cage with bars on the windows, and her hands and feet were tied to the bed. The constant dripping of water from a faucet in the corner was driving her mad. She began to scream for help. "Hey, someone help! Where am I?" She was terrified, not understanding where she was. Was this a prison or a hospital? Why was she alone? Her cries were quickly answered by the sound of a key scraping in the lock. Two people entered the room: a slender elderly man in a comical medical cap and his assistant. The elderly man spoke first. "Good afternoon. You're in a private psychiatric hospital. You were brought here from home in an unstable state. You attacked people and posed a danger to society. Your spouse reported that this isn't the first incident, so we'll be conducting a thorough examination and treatment." Irma couldn't believe what she was hearing. "Doctor, are you out of your mind? This is nonsense. I'm not crazy. I'm the director of a sewing factory. My husband set this up to make me seem insane. Untie me right now, or you'll regret it," she yelled. The doctor sighed. "Well, it seems like another relapse. Malcolm, give her a double dose. And you, dear, think about your behavior. If you behave well and quietly, I might even allow you some walks. But you're clearly unwell, and denial is a common symptom in patients like you. Whether you like it or not, we'll proceed with comprehensive drug therapy. Do you understand?" The doctor injected her with a murky liquid, and she quickly fell into a trance again. Meanwhile, back at the factory, Natalie had started her job. She worked hard, quickly learning her tasks and preparing her first reports. She eagerly awaited the chance to see Irma and thank her personally for the opportunity. But days passed, and Irma never showed up. Instead, her husband Noel suddenly took charge, calling a meeting with the employees. Noel informed the staff that Irma had suffered a prolonged illness and nervous breakdown and had been admitted to a psychiatric hospital for treatment. He even presented documents proving his legal right to manage all of the factory's assets and run the business. The employees were shocked and began whispering among themselves, realizing that Noel had no connection to the sewing business and was unlikely to manage the company as successfully as Irma. These rumors reached Natalie, and she was stunned. First, she knew if Noel met her, he would likely fire her immediately. Second, Natalie had personally spoken to Irma, who had seemed completely rational. How had she ended up in a psychiatric hospital, especially right after Natalie had revealed the truth about Noel? Something didn't add up. Worried and determined to help Irma, who had been so kind and forgiving, Natalie realized that Noel was capable of any villainy. Desperate to save her, Natalie went to the police, trying to explain that Irma had been forcibly placed in a psychiatric hospital and that her life and health were in danger. However, the investigator was skeptical and dismissed her story. Realizing that no one was going to help, Natalie was left feeling devastated. But Natalie had no intention of backing down. She decided to take a different approach. Secretly, she opened Irma's personal file and found out that Irma had a younger brother, Devon, who was a commander in the military. Natalie decided to track him down. When Devon learned everything, he was deeply concerned. "You're right, Natalie. Something is definitely wrong here. My sister couldn't have ended up in such a place unless someone framed her. I never liked Noel, and I trust his mother even less. Here's what we'll do. I'm on duty right now and can't leave, but I'll transfer you the money and give you the number of a good private detective I know. Contact him tomorrow and let him find out which hospital Irma is in and what's happening to her." I'll try to take some leave and come as well. We'll get to the bottom of this." Now fully convinced she was doing the right thing, Natalie contacted the private detective. She was received by Detective Paul, who, unlike the police, listened attentively and took notes. Natalie was extremely nervous. Her hands shook as she pleaded, "Please figure this out. Irma is a sane woman. She helped me so much, and I can't leave her in trouble. Her husband Noel is dangerous and unscrupulous. I'm sure he's behind all of this. Now he's running Irma's business, using documents where she supposedly gave him control. She couldn't have signed those papers in her right mind. Just the day before, she found out that Noel had a mistress. I'm the one who told her." Paul looked at the frightened but determined young woman and reassured her. "Natalie, I'll take on this case not just for the money but also because of my friendship with Irma's brother, Devon. I promise to see this through. You can help me by always carrying a recorder at work. Listen and watch everything closely and leave the rest to me. I'll deal with this private clinic. After all, no patient can be admitted without a court order. I suspect there's been some bribery involved." Paul's attempts to meet with Irma or negotiate with the chief physician were futile. The clinic, being private, only provided the vague explanation that Irma had been brought in from home in an unfit state and was undergoing necessary treatment. Visits were prohibited, even for relatives. That was it. But Paul didn't give up. He filed a formal complaint with the Ministry of Health and the prosecutor's office on behalf of Devon, stating that Irma was being held against her will. Additionally, he found a list of the clinic's staff and bribed a new orderly to keep an eye on the situation. Meanwhile, Natalie actively assisted Paul, reporting on the factory's affairs daily and providing recordings from her hidden recorder. It became clear that Noel was transferring company finances to suspicious accounts, likely planning to bankrupt the business and sell it off. Unfortunately, they couldn't act until Irma herself could refute the signatures and the power of attorney Noel was using. During this time, Paul and Natalie grew closer, forming not only a friendship but also romantic feelings. However, Natalie was hesitant. She was pregnant with another man's child, and she feared that Paul wouldn't accept her situation. As a result, their relationship remained platonic, filled with tenderness and affection, but no intimacy. Back at the clinic, Irma lost track of time. She no longer knew what month it was or what the weather was like outside. None of it mattered. The people in white coats fed her powerful drugs every day, but they never released her from isolation. She spent her days sitting on the bed, refusing to eat. One day, orderly Caleb entered her room and whispered softly, "Listen carefully. Your friend Natalie, your brother Devon, and a detective are working to get you out of here. Trust me. Don't swallow the pills. Hide them under your tongue and spit them out later, or you'll stay like this forever. But be careful if the doctor suspects anything. It's over for both of us." In Irma's cloudy eyes, Caleb saw a flicker of awareness. He hoped she understood and quickly stepped away, not wanting to draw attention. From that day, Irma learned to deceive the doctors. She pretended to take the medication but disposed of the pills in the toilet. Slowly, she began to feel better, and most importantly, hope started to return. She was determined to escape, mentally thanking Natalie for noticing her disappearance in the first place. Meanwhile, Noel was jubilant. He had successfully sold. Noel had sold Irma's apartment at a profit, transferred all the money to his account, and was now packing his bags with his mother. They were preparing for a long journey, and Irma's fate no longer concerned him. He was completely indifferent to her. He had only married her for her wealth, and in recent years his unloved wife had become so tiresome that he decided to get rid of her. Noel could already picture himself sunbathing on the beach and flirting with young women. He was confident that even if Irma ever got out of the psychiatric hospital, she wouldn't remember anything. At least that's what the doctor he bribed had promised. A month had passed. The detective, along with Irma's brother Devon and Natalie, had succeeded in getting her released. Investigations began at the clinic, revealing widespread violations, including many patients who weren't even registered there. They all gathered at the clinic gates to meet Irma. Devon rushed to embrace his sister, tears in his eyes, cursing, "Irma, my dear, what have these scoundrels done to you? I don't recognize my confident sister, but don't worry, you'll stay with me now, regain your strength, and we'll figure everything out. I'll always be by your side." Irma, confused, asked, "Why with you? I have my own apartment and plenty of work to do." Natalie hugged Irma, struggling to break the terrible news. "It's not that simple, Irma. Noel sold everything, your apartment and the factory. We couldn't stop it because you had signed powers of attorney, giving him the right to dispose of all your property. We know this was done under the emotional pressure from your husband." Irma covered her face with her hands and sobbed. She was now penniless, unable to believe that the man she had loved had turned out to be such a heartless monster. In a fit of hysteria, she screamed until she was hoarse, "My God, why did he do this to me? I loved him so much. I never did anything wrong to him. How could anyone be so cruel?" Devon comforted his sister as best he could, taking her to his rented apartment, where their sister Lily was already waiting. "Irma, my dear, I'm so glad to see you. Natalie told me everything. We owe her so much. If it weren't for her, we wouldn't have known anything. You've lost weight, but don't be sad, sis. Life throws challenges our way sometimes, but you've always helped me and Devon, and now we won't abandon you. We just need some time." It took Irma a whole month to return to some semblance of normalcy, but her husband's betrayal still haunted her. Her family's support helped her through, and Natalie and Paul often visited. They had grown closer and were now together, which Irma was grateful for. However, she knew she couldn't live off her family forever. One day over lunch she said, "Well guys, thank you for everything, your support and help, but I need to look for a job and start my life over from scratch." Devon cautiously asked, "What do you plan to do? Will you try to start production again, or something else?" Irma sighed heavily and shook her head. "No, brother, I don't want to. I realized that this race for a career and money didn't bring me happiness. In fact, it's what led to all of this. I'll take a simple job for now, at least until I recover from this nightmare." Suddenly, Lily spoke up. "Listen, Irma, I work as a cook at a cafe, which is part of a country resort. They're looking for a chambermaid. If you want, I can arrange it for you. The air is so fresh there, and you can take walks on the weekends. Nature will heal all your emotional wounds, and I'm not far away, so we can see each other more often." Irma smiled and said, "I agree. That sounds exactly like what I need. Thank you for everything. You know, when we were kids, I used to get so angry when Mom made me play with you two all the time. But now I realize how wonderful it is to have a brother and sister who are always there for me." Irma got the job and surprisingly found that she enjoyed cleaning. She didn't feel comfortable taking something that didn't belong to her. At the end of her shift, she found the guest's surname and contact information. Determined to return the phone, she set out to find the owner. She remembered the guest clearly, a pleasant man in his 40s, athletic, with a kind demeanor. But mysteriously he had vanished from the hotel. He was at dinner the night before, but by morning she had been instructed to urgently clean his room. The fact that he had seemingly disappeared without a trace troubled Irma deeply, and she felt that something wasn't right. Irma called the apartment, but when the door opened, it was answered by a vulgarly made-up, unpleasant woman who stared at her with confusion. "Do we know each other?" Irma took the phone out of her bag and began, "Hello, I work as a chambermaid at the hotel." One day, while tidying up a room, she found a phone that had fallen between the bed and a chair. Without hesitation, she took the phone to the administrator, Joshua, and handed it over. "I found this in the room. It needs to be returned to the guest." Joshua waved dismissively. "Irma, I appreciate your honesty, but no one has claimed it, and the room has been vacant for nearly a day. If the phone were important, the owner would have come back for it. Take it if you want, and finish cleaning up. We're expecting important guests." Irma was taken aback. "Yesterday I found this phone in one of the rooms. It belongs to Andrew. He lives here, doesn't he? Someone must be looking for him, especially since it's an expensive item." To her surprise, the woman began shouting, "I don't need this phone. And my husband isn't home. In fact, we haven't been living together for a month. We're getting divorced. So you found it at the hotel? What was he doing there? Probably fooling around with other women. Don't come here anymore." She slammed the door in Irma's face. Irma was shocked. How could this woman be so indifferent to her own husband? It reminded her too much of what she had recently been through herself. Determined to help, Irma returned to the hotel, charged the phone, and decided to check its contents. To her surprise, there was no password. She looked through the photos. Everything seemed normal: family pictures, beautiful landscapes, and advertisements. But then, she found a very recent video. What she saw horrified her. It was footage from a surveillance camera. Two young men with knives were attacking a respectable-looking man in a suit. Irma immediately shut her eyes and screamed before quickly turning off the phone. She dressed quickly and ran to the police station. After viewing the footage, the investigator was equally shocked. "Wow, we've been working on an unsolved case involving the death of a banker. It turns out this Andrew had evidence of the murder, and he was probably being threatened. The criminals are known figures in the criminal underworld. Thank you." "Ma'am, you've almost solved the case for us. We'll find Andrew, no doubt. You're free to go." Irma was worried and pleaded, "Please find Andrew. I don't know him personally, but I think he's in serious trouble and no one seems to care." For a week passed, and Irma couldn't stop thinking about the missing guest. Then, one day, she received a call from the same investigator with good news. "Good day. We found Andrew. The criminals had been hiding him in the basement of an abandoned house on the outskirts of town. They were torturing him, trying to get the surveillance footage. He's now undergoing treatment at the city hospital. You can visit him if you want." Irma could barely finish her shift, and the next morning, she went to visit Andrew. As she made her way to the hospital, she wondered what she would say to him and how their meeting would go, nervously. She knocked on the door and entered the hospital room. She immediately recognized Andrew from the photos on his phone. He lay on the bed with his leg in a cast, his arms and head bandaged, and several plasters covering the scratches on his face. When Andrew saw her, he smiled warmly. Irma introduced herself. "Hello, Andrew. I'm Irma, the chambermaid from the hotel where you stayed. I found your phone while cleaning. The investigator told me they found you, so I decided to visit. How are you feeling? I brought you some food." Andrew, on the verge of tears, grabbed Irma's hands and began to thank her. "Thank you, Irma. Thank you so much. If it weren't for you, I would have been killed for sure. The investigator told me how persistently you tried to return my phone and even went to the police. I work as a security guard at a bank and often review surveillance footage. That night, the bank manager was attacked, and I had the recording. I didn't have time to take it to the police because I was being threatened, so I hid in hotels, thinking I could outsmart the criminals. But I nearly lost my life. They broke my arms and legs trying to get the footage from me. You saved my life." Irma, feeling a mix of emotions, said quietly, "Honestly, I wasn't planning to go to the police at first. Your wife didn't seem to care about your phone either." Andrew sighed heavily. "Yes, we're getting divorced. She's angry with me. She didn't like my job, thought I didn't make enough money, and complained about our modest apartment. I didn't even want to go home to her, but I endured it because I still loved her. And then, recently she found another man, so she told me she's divorcing me. Will you come visit me again? I would really like that." "It's so nice when such a beautiful and kind woman cares about you," Andrew said. Irma started visiting Andrew regularly in the hospital. They talked a lot. She shared her story with him, how she had gone from being a director to a chambermaid, and about her husband's betrayal. Andrew listened with genuine sympathy, and slowly, without either of them noticing, they grew closer. Eventually, they began dating. Andrew divorced his wife and rented an apartment, where he and Irma moved in together. One evening, during dinner, Andrew asked Irma, "Tell me, what is your deepest dream? What do you want most? It's very important for me to know." Irma smiled sadly and replied, I spent my entire childhood taking care of my younger brother and sister. Then I studied hard and worked endlessly, thinking that success and a good job were the most important things in life. I wanted to escape poverty and prove myself. But when I lost everything, I realized I hadn't really been living my own life. I was living someone else's idea of success. I never took vacations, always working, always hustling. Now it all seems so meaningless. My biggest dream now is to live with you by the sea, to walk along the coast, and just love each other." Andrew hugged her tenderly. "That's a beautiful dream. I've been thinking the same thing. I want us to leave all the bad memories behind. After my divorce, I still have a house in the suburbs and a car. If we sell everything, I think we could buy a small house by the sea. Will you come with me? I'd be happy to spend the rest of my life with you. You're the first woman who has truly cared about me, who loves me for who I am. I feel it, darling, and I want to spend every moment with you." Irma kissed Andrew and said, "I agree. And don't worry about money, happiness isn't found in wealth. I've learned that the hard way." So the couple did just that. They sold everything, bought a small house by the sea, and moved there. Irma was truly happy. She and Andrew lived a life filled with love and understanding. Irma got a job as an accountant, and Andrew worked repairing household appliances for a small company. Natalie and Paul got married, and Natalie gave birth to a wonderful baby boy. Paul adopted the child as his own, giving him his surname and calling him his son from the very start. Natalie greatly appreciated everything Paul did for her and now understood what a real partner should be. They, along with Paul's family and Irma's sister Lily, often visited Irma and Andrew. Sometimes there were so many guests that some had to sleep in the gazebo outside. Irma loved it. She especially enjoyed the evenings when they had dinner outside, surrounded by laughter and playful nephews running around, eating sweet grapes. It filled her heart with warmth to be surrounded by loyal friends and her beloved husband. One day, while Irma and Natalie were setting the table, an old TV in the kitchen was playing the news. Suddenly, the anchor announced yesterday Noel and his mother Taran died in an avalanche at a ski resort. Unfortunately, no one could be saved. Everyone in the room froze. Irma dropped the plate she was holding, and it shattered into pieces. Natalie hugged her and said, "Well, life has a way of balancing things out. He thought he could live off your money until retirement. Honestly, I don't feel sorry for him at all. He ruined both of our lives, and this is what he deserves." Irma, regaining her composure, said, "You're right. Of course you're right. But on the other hand, if it weren't for the divorce, I never would have met Andrew. And you never would have met Paul, right? The most important thing is that we found love and built new families. Let's not think about Noel anymore, okay?" Irma became the godmother to Natalie's son, and Andrew became his godfather. They adored spending time with the little boy, giving him gifts and teaching him everything they knew. Irma realized that if two people truly love each other, whether or not they have children doesn't matter. After all, just being with your beloved even in silence is happiness, isn't it?